Guys, today I'm extremely excited for our video because I'm here with Emrys, my good friend Emrys, and he's an ENFJ.
I'm a Texan who is attending the same university as Denzel here, and I'm studying global studies and teaching English as a second language. Ideally, I would like to teach people about philosophy and like holistic wellness and spirituality, like Christianity and Jesus and stuff. Hobbies, I'm into tabletop role playing games, so like collaborative storytelling and improv acting with friends. And I love reading. I love philosophy. I love discussions like this. I'm really into MBTI, and
Yeah.
I'm never sure how to introduce myself exactly.
No, I feel you. I actually
Yeah.
put you on the spot for a reason because I'm not usually really good with introducing myself.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah.
Like I said, he's an ENFJ, and I'm going to start off by saying how we met, at least from like how I remember it. So I work here at the library, and this was like last year. From what I recall, I was helping him out, and I was reading a book called, I think it was Pastoring and Myers-Briggs, something like that. It had to do with like Christianity and Myers-Briggs like combined into something along those lines. And I was like reading it, and in between, reading it, in between helping customers, I'd be reading it, whatever. He was just another customer to me, and I'm nice to everyone at my job. I love my job, just so you know. So I was kind to him. I helped him out and all of that, and he noticed as I was like helping check out like one of his books. He was like, "Oh, are you into Jungian theory?" And from the moment that he said that, that's where I was like, "Oh, he must know a little bit more than just the dichotomies." But I still didn't like give him like too much more. I was like, "Oh yeah, like I'm into Myers-Briggs and all of that." I wasn't trying to get like as deep because everybody thinks they know about Myers-Briggs, but then they really don't. And he surprised me. I don't remember what exactly that happened, but I think you guessed my type. And I was like, yeah, but then again, I was like, oh, maybe he just still kind of knows. He's like, no, I'm ENFJ too. I was like, what? I actually thought that he was an introvert during our first conversation. And then I've definitely seen the FE dominant come out in you, but you're still like so composed when you speak to other people. Like today we've been hanging out, and as he like interact with other people, it's so like intentional and like just really like engaged and all that. And I've just been like I've just been observing that, and I'm just like, okay. I guess we're gonna talk a little bit more about that, like with Effie. But yeah, I'm really excited because that day we had this whole long conversation, just like bouncing back and forth at my desk, and it was to the point where we talked for like probably like what 35 minutes straight.
At least that might have been the introduction.
Yeah, about just Myers-Briggs, personality hacker, all of that, and like how we relate as ENFJs. And we were talking so rapidly and so intuitively that by the time he left, one of my coworkers, who now she knows that she's an INFP, she came up to me and she was like, "Hey, I don't know what you guys were talking about over there, but I'm very interested in like knowing about it." And so now she's like been telling all of my coworkers about my YouTube channel and Myers-Briggs, and it's been great.
All right. What's up, everyone? So, as y'all can see, I'm back with Emrys McCright. McCright. That's how he said it, I think. I'm back with Emrys 4 years later. Unfortunately, we couldn't do this in real time. Well, not in real time, but like in real life. But even from afar, like, still able to make this work. And this video is, as y'all can see, a sequel to the last video that we did together, the ENFJ deep dive video with Emrys, and pretty much like explaining what the ENFJ type is in depth. This time I wanted us to do like not necessarily like a recap, but actually like a catch up with how Emrys has grown. Like we looked at an ENFJ 4 years ago. We got to ask him a few questions. We got to see wherever his mind was on certain things. And now we're giving him the opportunity to just present his natural self once again. And for those of you who watched who watched already the last one, now you're watching this one, you'll be able to compare and contrast. and maybe like glean from that whatever you want. But yeah, so we're just gonna have Emrys here. We're just gonna have some really interesting conversation, pretty natural, and catching up on a lot of things. So, Emrys, first and foremost, is there anything that comes to mind right away?
As for things that have changed,
Yeah. Like, what are you doing now? Because I know that we, in the last video, you talked about how like you were a global studies major and you pretty much wanted to go around and teach about the gospel and all of that. So, like,
yes. Now I'm doing teaching, though not specifically about the gospel, and tutoring. The majority of the major changes that have happened could be summarized by saying that rather than identifying as an evangelical Christian, I am mainly structuring my life and my philosophical and theological thinking around non-dual spirituality. So I'll leave that up to your listeners to what extent that classifies me as following Jesus's teachings and to what extent that still classifies me as a Christian. With regard to that specifically, I would say that to the desire to go around and teach people the gospel, I would say that for me, the gospel or the good news or the reality of God's activity in the world has changed from heaven is out there somewhere in the future, and we got to make sure as many people get there as quickly as possible so Jesus comes back and fixes everything, and has changed from that, which was sort of how I viewed it back then, into heaven is a presently accessible reality that each person is gradually moving towards along their own path, and that there's not this frantic need to make everyone or try to convince everyone to see God in reality the way that I see God in reality, and that there's not this perception that the best way to fix the world is just make sure Jesus comes back as soon as possible, but rather to trust God's plan for how this all unfolds and to seek and see and serve God in all, and to do that primarily characterized by unconditional love.
Gotcha. No, I hear that. Okay. Yeah, that is, I guess, yeah, like you said, we'll leave it up to them to see like how much that's changed.
I enjoy being a little challenging in making people have to think about what exactly to categorize me as.
Yeah, no, I feel that. And I feel like on top of that, it's also really cool to see how you've clearly been continuing to develop your perspectives and your thoughts on life and spiritual matters and everything pretty much. So that's cool because then it's like, okay, you're clearly not someone, you just kind of like reminded me of the ENFJ subtype video that I made, the chill philosopher, like, oh, I'm not really much of a flagpoler. I just kind of, like the more that I realized that I thought I knew, the more that I don't really know. And so, you know what, I'm just kind of like, this is what I'm with right now. And hey, I might change my mind about it eventually. Would you say that's
right? I'm an incredibly humble person.
And you're an Enneagram 3.
Yes, of course.
We figured that out too. For those who don't know, we
in all honesty,
about that in the last video. But Emrys, Emrys, and my wife Jamila, we sat down and we kind of did an Enneagram profiling session with him. It went absolutely lovely. It actually went really, really well. And turns out that Emrys is an ENFJ sexual social 3. Yes, I believe it was sexual social, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So make of that whatever you want. But yeah, just going on with what you're saying, I think you were talking about how humble you are.
Yeah, incredibly so.
No, just for the record, honestly, though, I will speak on Emrys's behalf. He is actually incredibly modest. So there's never been a moment that Emrys has made me think that he thinks himself higher than other people. So I will just
No,
say that.
I have a tendency internally to want to flagpole, and that's partly something that my recent like philosophical and spiritual and personal journeys have been about moving past, because it's largely coming from a place of wanting to understand and categorize reality and be right about everything, and then insist on declaring that to others. But I recognize that that's not the deepest desire of my heart, and I recognize that it's not an accurate reflection of how to best serve others in reality.
Mm.
So I try to observe and accept and offer love to that part of myself without agreeing with its suggested methods of flagpoling.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that relates a little bit to the idea of ENFJs, where like externally they're often seen to be like, oh, they're so like non-judgmental of people, but there is that aspect that's like they're still very much judgers.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Because to me, what that immediately struck me as was going from a very FE place of like organizing the external world, like this is how things should be done. Again, referring back to that archetype video, like sort of like a shepherd, social justice warrior, type of like, mindset or type of like archetype, to now like more of a, again, like chill philosopher, like, you know what? I'm just more of like an observation, thinking, gathering. I don't really know. And each of them have their own pros and cons. Like the chill philosopher is, as I depicted in the video, like, they a lot of times, like, it's hard for them to have a stance. It's hard for them to flagpole. So it's like, if you need them to like fight for a certain cause, a lot of times, like it's difficult because a lot of times they can see too much of both sides. And it's like, well, then what are you good for? Unless if it's mediating, of course. But like if like there's one side that's like really just outright wrong, but you're seeing too much of the other sides, like again, you're not going to really help out. We do need like a social justice warrior / social police type of person who has a flagpole. It's like, no, this is not okay. We have to assert against this kind of thing. But yeah, I feel like that's like, as an ENFJ, like this is like, in my opinion, like a sign of like, its own NI development, because now it's like, okay, you've been gathering like more perspectives, you've been gathering more information. And so now it's like, okay, the FE Dom in me like wants to settle on something. But then the NI is like, oh, but here's some more information, here's some more information. And then TI is just like constantly like assessing it and all of that. And so with time, it's almost like, in my opinion, like when you are able to gather all of that, you can lead people more effectively, because then you've seen different paths of life. So then you're able to help the person to be able to go in the path that's most necessary for them, because you can see where all the paths kind of like lead. And therefore, sure, you didn't like necessarily like plant a flagpole, but it's like, where do you want to go? Where do you need to be? I can help you get there, even though I myself have not chosen a road. Granted, like you said,
Yes.
like you do identify as like you said, dual. What's the term? Sorry.
Non-dual spirituality is probably the
Non-dual.
simplest way of putting it.
Okay, yeah, and you definitely should probably define that if you can, and if you.
I would define it as the perspective that everything that exists is one, and that one is God, or you could use any number of terms there, the universe, the divine, I like the one infinite creator as a sort of neutral way of putting it. And that one is love. And is light, like everything else being made of light or energy.
Gotcha.
So from that flows a lot of those other things. And
yeah,
I was having a laugh at myself a little bit as you were speaking, because I realized that I do still have a flagpole that I plant. It's just a flagpole that attempts to encompass many, many different perspectives So yeah, like the unity of all is very much still a flagpole belief for me.
Yeah, I was gonna say that already sounds like very FENI, like all is one and it's love. And yeah, so that to me is like, yeah, no, we're, if anything, like you can identify, which also sounds very three-ish, very chameleon-like, because then with whatever perspective somebody brings to you, you can identify with it to an extent.
Mhm. I would say that both of those aspects of my personality, the FE and NI and the three nature, have made it easier for me to accept those ideas. I would say that lots of people come to those ideas from very different directions. So
Mm.
some people end up, getting into Buddhism and being like, oh, everything is actually emptiness, and that emptiness is infinity, or end up diving into Christian mysticism and finding that Christ is in everything. Or maybe they just get into logic and start realizing that God being infinite would have no separation between God and anything else that exists.
Mm.
So there's lots of different ways of getting that perspective. But yes, for me, I would say that those aspects of my personality made it a great relief when I came to that belief because, well, so I'll give an example of how it interacted with my personal life. I'm a big fan of the D&D web show Critical Role, and there's the guy who does the dungeon master on that is an incredibly kind human being and often very insightful and often very gentle and humble. And I remember several years ago just being like, I'm really torn up that this person is probably going to be burning in hell forever because I'm by standard Christian beliefs, like, he's not a Christian and very much doesn't intend to become one.
Mm.
And not to say that this was my motivation for changing beliefs, but the change in beliefs actually opened up a lot of area to fully express FE and NI in being able to look at other people and rather being in constant fear for them, able to see the beauty in them that's unique about them and to relate to them from a place of love. Because what I found was that as long as I was relating to them from a place of fear, I couldn't really relate to them from a place of love.
Mm. Wow. That's interesting. That's a lot to digest, but immediately like it makes sense too, because scripturally, Bible already says even in itself that perfect love casts out all fear. So I think that, I mean, I guess that makes sense. It's like, if you just continue to just love the person, which is also what Jesus himself did too. If you just continue to just love the person, then, that in and of itself will like cast out whatever fear that's abiding, I guess. If we're
You
going by
mentioned a
that.
specific guideline in being of service to others in relation to the chill philosopher and the shepherd and social justice warrior. And
Mhm.
that was the chill philosopher's approach of attempting to see, okay, what is it that you want to develop? What do you want to become? Where do you want to go? And how can I help you reach that goal?
Mm.
Where the freedom and free will of the person you want to serve is placed as paramount in deciding how you serve them. And then to your point about the development of NI leading to different ways of serving and different abilities to serve, I think it's important for us to emphasize that that's an intuitive way of knowing rather than we don't have visions of knowing every single path consciously, but we more and more are able to be guided by intuition of how to best serve a person in the moment. And so that can be taken into the roles of shepherd or social justice warrior. And rather than attempting to follow a script or get everyone to conform to a paradigm, involves intuitively sensing, okay, how can I be of service to this person that I'm with right now?
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense totally. Which also is actually funny because your main archetype, in my opinion, is not even the chill philosopher, shepherd, or any of those. In my opinion, it's the oracle. But I told Emrys recently that after like he and I watched the video together and everything, I told him that to me, from my perspective, he's first of all the most Oracle ENFJ that I know in real life personally. But on top of that, in my depiction of the Oracle, he already seemed like pretty annoying. Like I feel like the only ENFJ Oracle that I know of that's not as annoying, but some people might still find annoying, is Tobin Frost from Safe House, because Oracles just already come off as like know-it-alls, since it's like transcended and everything like that. However, and I'm not saying that Emrys again like is most Oracle because of that, but if anything, I think that Emrys has found a really good way to like naturally fuse Oracle archetype of ENFJ with the helping hand ENFJ archetype. And so
Yeah, that was a gradual lesson for me. Like I've spent much of my teenage and early 20s years kind of overwhelming people with giving impromptu lectures on philosophical and theological concepts. And I've had several people in my life in the past be like, Emrys, what you're saying is great, but you're just like going way over people's heads, or like giving them way too much, or asking them way too many questions at once, and just being overwhelming in a variety of ways with that kind of oracly. And it took me getting into the non-dual spirituality thing and seeing free will as a paramount principle or guideline for how I wish to be of service to people, in order to see that, oh, I should prioritize first trying to discern what might be helpful to this person before just spouting off about oracle stuff.
Yep. Yeah. And that makes sense, because then, you know, with the helping hand, even though in the video I depicted the helping hand as someone who seems like super extroverted and high energy, I actually was telling a couple of my ENFJ friends just yesterday, I was like, you know, from the outside, that type of archetype could look like, you know, very extrovert and all that. And they are, but I think that we don't always see their solitude. Like, I think that same type of person is the same. Like I knew someone, like, I mean, me and you both went to Liberty, so we knew quite a few helping hand type of people. But there was somebody in particular that I knew that was an ENFJ helping hand subtype. Everywhere that he was walking on campus, it's like everyone loved this guy. Like, he just walked around and he always like flashed a smile, like, oh, hey. And like he literally was like that. So like I was almost like portraying him as I was, you know, depicting that in the video. But when I got to talk with him alone, because we had traveled together one time, in the car when we were like talking and everything like that, he was actually really chill, you know, and he was calm. And he actually, when I was trying to talk to him about type, he identified as an INFJ. And I'm like, this guy's more extroverted than I am. There's absolutely no way that he's an INFJ. He's like, yeah, no. Because I prefer to have one-on-one conversations, if anything. And that's how I'm like, okay, well, if that's your criteria, then you absolutely are not. That you just misunderstand functions, but it's all right, you know, whatever. But from that, I could already tell, like, okay, like this kind of like helping hand type of person, it's like they take the time to hear out other people and understand where they're coming from. And then it's like, again, like once you already have that kind of like listening ear, and also being the most warm of all of the 5 subtypes, in my opinion, then it's like now you can fuse that with one of the other subtypes of ENFJ to be able to help guide them and help direct them. But the best thing to always do is to be a listening ear to them first. And so with an oracle, like if you have just purely an oracle subtype, like you're always going to need to like mix that in with something that's more of like a listener, you know, so that you can be able to actually like help the person. Like, again, does this person really want to take that red pill, you know, or do they want to stick to the type of like reality that they live in and all of that? And you shouldn't look down on them for whatever that might be. Just because you've been enlightened in some way doesn't mean that now, you know, you are just that much better in some way, shape, or form. But you can also help people now even more effectively. So that's just something that came to mind.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons that's so important is that why it's important to wait for a request for help or a request for information or a request for your opinion, whether that request is, a verbally expressed one or simply someone's in pain and you know something that might be of help if you say it to them. I think it's important because if you don't wait for that, you have a very good chance of disrupting their personal or spiritual journey in a very unhelpful way.
Mm.
Like,
Mhm.
not everybody is going to find every oracle helpful.
Mhm.
And if your goal is for them to develop or grow in the best possible way for them, then that involves a lot of subtle carefulness of waiting until they request help in some way. Kind of like, you can't walk onto the street intending to help people who are homeless and offer help that hasn't been asked for or they haven't opened themselves up to. You're just going to make things worse. And you often need to, back to our theme, learn a fair bit of humility of realizing that they may end up teaching you far more than you teach them. And your role may be listening and giving the sage who's living on the street an outlet to use their gifts rather than fixing everything for them.
Right.
So humility and waiting for some kind of call for help or request for help is very paramount.
Yeah. I fully agree with that. That's awesome. Well, we are going to switch roles right now, or not switch roles, but like switch gears. Switch gears. And
all right, guys, welcome back to my channel.
And now we're going to actually talk about some ENFJ misconceptions. We're going to toss some of them back and forth. One of the first things that I actually wanted to address from our last video was obviously we're always learning more and more. Now I'm actually profiling professionally. This is my full-time job as well as coaching and all of that. So it's I've profiled so many different people of each type, and I've been learning more and more how certain functions can look like and things of that nature. And I know that from our original video, I defined FE and I leaned really heavily on the ability to be able to feel other people's emotions and stuff like that. But I think actually an even better description now that I've been beginning to realize is being able to understand the nuance of interpersonal dynamics. So this comes into being able to understand okay, what's the difference between a familial versus a romantic versus an erotic versus a platonic dynamic, stuff like that. And then sometimes these are even laced into each other. Sometimes familial and erotic, that's not a very good combination to have, but it happens, and I feel FE is very attuned to that because that's what it is. I see FE, not only it is everything that we said it was in the last video, but I think it's also in addition, especially in the ENFJ, is this keen awareness of the interpersonal dynamics that's going on. What's the line between me and that person? What's the line between that person and that person? What's the line between everybody in this group? And just seeing this huge spider web, and then being able to identify how strong each one is. And it's constantly assessing okay, where are the weak points in this dynamic? Where are the strong points in this dynamic? How can we make the weak points stronger? How can we make the strong points stronger? And this is why a lot of times FE users, especially NFJs, they're always constantly focusing on their interpersonal relationships and other people's interpersonal relationships because they are so attuned to that line between people or the lines between people. And that's what they've focused on and studied all the time. And so they're constantly trying to improve that. And that's how, Martin Luther King Jr. once again was able to help all of society to be able to strengthen their lines, Black people and white people strengthen their lines with each other, because it's we can't continue to live life like this. So I think that's like a really big thing that FE should also be seen for. It's not just, it is like every function has facets to it. But so all of what we said in the previous video, like I said, is also still FE. We're not backtracking on that, but I want to add like a huge component to it that from what I've realized is that FE is really just keen to the interpersonal dynamics that surrounds it. Just like how FI is very keen and aware of all the nuances, that it's not just anger, it's not just happiness, it's not just sadness, but there's like different nuances of each emotion, of each value, of each motivation. FE is very aware of all the different ways that people can interact with each other, all the different ways that people, all the different types of relationships that people can have with each other, and then strengthening that and paying keen attention to that, and then how that interpersonal like may affect other people. So once again, going back to, oh, how do the social dominoes play? Like how, like, okay, this might make that person sad, and that's why FE is so attuned to like, okay, you should say things in this tone, or you should do this, because when you present it in this manner, then this is the emotional effect that it's going to have on the rest of the group. So I think that was something that I really wanted to add in that I didn't add in on the last video. And would you say that you agree with that, Emrys?
Yeah, I would say I conceptualize it as FE, often seeing the differences between people, and rather than bringing them together by eliminating differences, it sees ways in which those differences can more efficiently communicate with each other and understand each other, and ways in which the unique characteristics of an individual can be influenced or altered by the characteristics of others. So
Yeah.
each individual ends up taking on aspects of the other people around them. And I would also say, what the heck, I'll use a far out there mystical analogy. One of the core ideas in Buddhism, for example, is that there are no, strictly speaking, like individuals. Everything is just a process of interaction. And I would say that whether or not you think there are individuals, FE sees the processes of interaction between the individuals, and you can think of it as you're describing as like a giant web, where whether or not you think the points on the web, the cross points, are, you know, actual individuals or just processes, FE sees the lines of connection and distance very easily.
Yes, 100%. And I even described it on the podcast that I had with Antonia and Joel with Personality Hacker. I explained to them how like I'll see these lines between individuals, myself and individuals, and then individuals within themselves. And in my head, as crazy as it sounds, I can see colors a lot of times. Like, okay, green means that it's great. White means that, okay, it's just regular, you know. When it's yellow, it's like, that's kind of like on thin ice. And then when it's red, it's like, whoa, these people are like fighting. And just because I think that very common FESE is, whoa, I see red. And then they jump right to try to like fix it without even being asked. Whereas I think seasoned ENFJs, they're able to be like, okay, wait a minute. Number one, is it my job right now to fix that situation? Or is it just going to handle itself? Or if I get involved, will I make it even worse? How will I fix the situation? What's going to be the long-term effects of it? You know, and really thinking through this thing before they're going into like, you know, actually engage. Which is, I think that the more the ENFJ like grows, the more they find out like how to do that kind of thing when choosing your battles, like knowing like when to get involved and when not to get involved.
It's like NI telling FE when there are opportunities to alter the connections in helpful ways and when there are not.
Yes, precisely. So yeah, that's just something that definitely wanted to throw in there and clarify since we're doing the part 2. But now
I want to ask you, do you ever see orange connections between people?
I'm trying to remember. I have to literally close my eyes for this. I think I do. I think yes. But I usually just associate it with yellow.
Mhm.
But yeah, because they're like different shades. It's kind of like orange turning into yellow in a way. Yeah. And so I just kind of like lump it with yellow. That's
I
how,
would guess
yeah.
I would guess
And
that if this happens, it's way more rare. But do you ever see blue?
no, I don't remember seeing blue. I don't think so. Those are the colors that you associate things with in your mind. I want to hear about that.
They correspond to. You can edit this out if it's irrelevant to the video topic. They correspond very interestingly accurately to the colors of.
That's crazy. Okay, wait, you're back now, I think.
Oh,
Okay.
I think we lost connection for a moment there.
Okay.
You froze. Like it took me a minute to realize you were frozen and not just like listening really well.
I can
You listen
understand
very
that.
well.
They do look kind of the same. That's why I nodded. But sorry, what were you saying? You said
Yeah.
that you said
Your
blue.
your experiences with the colors correspond very well to the colors associated with the chakras in Hindu thing.
You froze again. Bruh. He'll be back. He always comes back. There he is. Okay.
Can you hear me or see me?
I can see you and I can hear you again.
Okay.
I feel like there's some spiritual forces that are really keeping you from divulging the mystical wonders of the interpersonal
Yes.
sociogram.
The demons are in my Wi-Fi, man.
Okay,
Gotta
no.
get a priest in here.
It's crazy. Okay, you were saying.
So I was saying your experiences with the colors correspond in interesting ways to the colors associated with the chakras in Hindu philosophy and with what they're often associated with as far as relationships with others. And I'm the furthest thing from an expert on this, so take this with lots of grains of salt.
Mm.
But generally speaking, the root chakra is considered to be the red one and is generally associated with like survival and basic sexuality. And it often gets associated with like surges of anger and things like that. Very.
You froze. We're just gonna edit all of this.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what's
We can
going
delay
on.
this for another video. It's okay.
No, but I definitely want to hear. I
Okay.
definitely want to hear. Definitely want to hear. Okay, so
You
the
want
last
me
thing
to
you
say it
said-
now, or you want to hear it later at another time when we're talking?
Right. No, I want to hear this right now. The last thing that you said was the red chakra is associated with surges of survival and
The root chakra, which is at the base of the spine.
guys, ain't this a mess? That is really crazy.
We still getting interference, huh?
Yeah.
All right, let's try another topic and see what
Right.
happens.
Oh, yeah. Let's go ahead and do that. All right. So, for those of you who do not know, I wrote a blog a while back. I believe it was 10 things everyone should know about ENFJs, or 10 things that an ENFJ would want you to know about them. And me and Emrys discussed it. And Emrys had some thoughts and ideas. If you want, the link to the blog site where the blog article can be found will be in the description. So you guys can actually open that up in a new tab and like read along if you like. But right now, I want Emrys actually to share some of his thoughts from that article. So
Okay.
yeah.
So your first point in that article was that we're not just watered down, louder and shallower INFJs.
Oh yeah.
And I had two reasons come to mind why ENFJs are sometimes perceived as more shallow INFJs.
Mm.
One, it's not as instinctual or automatic for ENFJs to develop their NI as it is for INFJs to develop it. And for both, NI is the function through which most of the thoughts that we would describe as deep are processed. So if they haven't developed NI, they'll often come across as more shallow.
Right. Right.
Secondly, information processing through introverted functions is more likely to be expressed in things like online discussions than information processing through extroverted functions. So most of the online discussion about the relationship between MBTI and deep thoughts take place in written mediums like blogs and forums and one-person videos, which usually requires writing or isolated stream of consciousness statements of thoughts more than that have more of an introverted component to them because you're looking internally a lot of the time, rather than speaking verbally with another person necessarily. Because in writing, the only immediate feedback to the thoughts you're expressing comes from yourself. So people who more instinctually or automatically use an introverted function are more likely to contribute to those online discussions, which has the potential to skew the perceptions of which types have more deep thoughts because most of MBTI is discussed online.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I definitely feel like that. I think that's spot on. I know that even with one of the ENFJs that I talked to about, that I talked to when they watched my subtype video, she was like, "Oh my goodness, like that was really good. I could see all of them for you." And then I was like, "All right, but yeah, what about you?" And she's an ENFJ social 7. Now my father is also an ENFJ social 7, but he's crazy NI developed. So it's like, even then it's like, I don't really know, you know? But she was like, yeah, I don't know which one I was. I didn't really strongly identify with like any of them. I mean, like maybe the helping hand. The only thing about that is just I'm not like that philosophical or like much of a motivational speaker. And I'm positive that she's an ENFJ. But it was just like, dang, like that. I think that was like one of the eye openers for me. That's like, wow, like this is really just, you know. And she is someone who's just like always on the go. Like, so it's like, like maybe she really just doesn't spend enough time like with her thoughts and like reading certain things. And she even said like she likes to do everything like fast. Like if she hasn't learned something like quickly, then she just wants to like move on to like the next thing in a way. And so to me, it's like, yeah, what you're saying like makes sense, like how like it's not as easy or as natural for a lot of ENFJs. Or maybe I don't even want to say a lot. I feel like saying a lot is like, well, a lot, but like
For some.
yeah, for some ENFJs to like really like develop their introverted intuition function. Just like in my opinion, I think that there's a lot of INFJs who are not really inclined to develop their FE. They can use it like as a one-trick pony, like every now and then, like, you know, with niceties and stuff of that nature. But if anything, they often talk about like how much they hate people a lot of times, and like I'm just so drained and this, that, which in my opinion, like, I mean, I always say this, but like, I can't trust an INFJ's intuition if they have a hatred for FE, because that's where they're going to get the biggest insights for their NITI. And so for me, I think it's the same thing, like an ENFJ, like if you really want to like have that type of depth about humanity, then you do have to develop that NI function too. Like, you know, everybody has to develop that auxiliary function, which will naturally also develop that inferior function as well. And yeah, I think that's why like a lot of people, I guess, like they do see us in that manner. But I think that if anything, by that I meant that like we should just really have more of a spectrum, because what happens is that we end up having a whole slew of ENFJs then believing that they're INFJs, or people typing ENFJ characters as INFJs. And it's like, no, because you're cutting off a whole spectrum of the ENFJ. And once you cut it off short, then now, and you say like, oh, this is now INFJ territory, then no wonder you're cutting short like how we view ENFJs is just constantly feeding into that cycle of how they're like just these boisterous, watered down, shallower INFJs. When in actuality, it's like, no, that's because the ones that are actually more developed and all of that, you're going to claim them to be an INFJ that's just developed or something like that. Now, INFJs and ENFJs, when they're developed, they can look very similar. But there's that tertiary function and the inferior function. They're always going to be, like you can like the SE is always going to be stronger than the TI if it's an ENFJ, and that TI is always going to be stronger than the SE if it's an INFJ. So even if the dominant and the auxiliary are like pretty evenly matched, those back functions, they're always going to be like right then, like there's always going to be like a big gap right there that for the most part you'll be able to notice.
I think that the only thing I would add is that in our culture, we have a particularly strong bias towards seeing development and growth as inevitably expressing themselves in intellectual thought.
Mm-hmm.
And we, in general, have a bias towards intellectual thought and rational thought as opposed to emotional complexity and insight. And so when we look at development of NI, we expect that to manifest as people being able to articulate in words intellectual understandings of insights gained by intuition, when in reality, intuition operates on the level of feelings and sort of magnetically being drawn to something. So, like your friend, for example, maybe a person who has their NI quite developed in their ability to trust their intuition and to perceive things and to navigate emotions and internal insights, without having the intellectual component developed there, which, neither is bad. I just have a tendency to, I think, want to warn people that we already have a very strong bias toward the intellectual part in our culture, and that distances you another step from reality, because there's what is happening in the moment and what you're experiencing internally in the moment in response to what's occurring. And then there's how you describe it. So that's another step away from the actual event, from the actual reality. And so we can get very lost, let's say, or very distracted in wandering the halls of our own mental palaces of intellectual ideas and never come back down to what's actually happening in the moment, which is where all the growth and help to others and joy and all the things that make life worth living are actually located.
No, that makes total sense. Because I wouldn't say that person is an unhealthy ENFJ. They are more impulsive, quote unquote, than the average ENFJ that I know. And they'd say that even of themselves. But I think that that person is like very personable. And when you are sitting down and speaking to her and everything, she is good at being able to actually hop into the other person's perspective and stuff like that. And she knows a little bit about everything, which is usually how sevens are. If anything, actually, like Enneagram sevens, their growth point is 5. So maybe it's just more of an Enneagram thing. It's like, oh, we have to get you to actually focus enough so that you can learn one thing, which is my dad said, like, he had to do the same thing. Like, it wasn't until he became an elder at the church that he started like really focusing a lot on things. Like, before that, he was just like, hey, I'm here. And like, that's just kind of like how he is. And he still is like the life of the party, but like, he also has like a very strong, like, Iroh side to him, like from Avatar: The Last Airbender, like to the point where Jamila's never met him in person yet, just off of the iPad. And she tells me, like, Denzel, like, if you, like, the only reason why I believe that he's an extrovert is because you tell me so. Other than that, I would think like this man is like INFJ or ISFP or something, because he's just always like chilling. He's like, oh yeah, that's why. And he just talks like that. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like, this man, he's more outgoing than I am. Like,
I think the idea that you were raised by a chill and charming Iro has done more for me understanding you as a person than just about anything in the last.
It's funny though. He's a mixture between Iro and Reddington from the Blacklist. So like he's really, I'm telling you, he's a larger than life kind of person that likes to tell jokes and all of that. But yeah, he also is like a very like locks himself away in the study room to read the Bible and pray for hours. And that's like his form of like NI meditation in a way. And yeah, I really respect that. He's always been like, he doesn't want no trouble. If there's something happens like right away, like his like one of his favorite phrases is anyway. Whenever there's like something like happening, like if there's like a disagreement or something, he's like, you know what? It's kind of like his mind just clicks like, what's the point of this? Anyway. And so he's just straight to that. And I feel like, yeah, that like it has its own like usage. And I always talk about like how like one of the most socially strategic people I've ever met, or like that I know. Like he's incredibly like he is aware, and he knows how to finesse and everything in a certain type of manner. That one time I even told him like, I noticed what you did, boom, 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 and then he was like laughing about it, and then he was like, well, just because you brought it up, did you also notice that I did this? Because and I was like, what? And he was like, yeah, and that's why I said this to that person, because then I was like, yo. And I wish I could retell the story of like all of what happened, but it has like too many components to it. But I was just like, dang, this man he's amazing. I need to be like you. Yeah, and then he's looking up to people like Bishop T.D. Jakes, who he's an ENFJ, definitely a shepherd type, that every single sentence that this man speaks is just full of insight. Like it doesn't even make sense. I'm like, bro, how is everything that you say tweetable? I don't understand. Yeah, and so it's definitely like an interesting thing. But yeah, I agree with you that like our society definitely has like a bias towards that kind of archetype, that kind of like person in general, for sure.
So your second point was that we genuinely want to help the people we help. There's no ulterior motive unless the ENFJ is unhealthy or simply evil.
Yes.
Yes, I would say that there may be a confusion between the way in which that desire to help is developed in the ENFJ and assuming that that remains the motivation always. Because I would say the ENFJ becomes very sensitive to painful interactions with others or between others. And so there can develop through that way a desire to alleviate that suffering. But that doesn't mean that they're trying to manipulate in order to make themselves more comfortable or make themselves at a more advantageous position.
Yes.
It means that we find it easier to feel as if the suffering of others is a pain in our own bodies. And you wouldn't ignore a broken leg, so you're not going to ignore a broken other person.
Yeah.
So I will say that also comes with a certain amount of responsibility, because the natural abilities of FE and NI make it easy to see how you could manipulate others, or you could use the situation to your own advantage rather than focusing on the service of the other. And I would say that most of the time that's not the case, because for most people you run into, they're a mix of having positive and negative orientations, but they're not strongly dedicated to trying to manipulate others or be narcissistic or selfish. And then you will run into a lot of people who are very consciously dedicated to serving others, to unconditionally loving others. And I would say that the ENFJ is often let's say, blessed with a innate ability that makes it easier to move towards one of those poles, because they simultaneously they sense the effect that their actions have on others and the effect that others' actions have on each other. And so that presents them fairly quickly with a choice of, okay, are you going to see this person's pain as your own pain and attempt to reduce the suffering and help them? Or are you going to see this as an opportunity to manipulate and dominate other people so that you can gain advantage over them?
Exactly.
And it's just that decision is forced a little quicker.
Yeah, 100%. I don't even have anything to add to that. You eloquently explained that one, so I think that was great. Yeah.
You're always so encouraging. I really love it.
Oh man, I just be honest, because if I don't have something nice to say, trust me, I will not say anything. Yeah. But I'm putting up the blog myself as well, just to keep up.
Well, know that your attempts at encouragement are finding great success in me and in other people.
I'm glad, man. That's awesome.
You said that the general majority of us love hugs. I don't know exactly why, we just do. That's a very interesting one. The first thing that comes to mind is that everyone in our culture is pretty much touch starved, because we're so we have so few socially accepted avenues where touch is encouraged. Like, it's not normal for us to, well, okay, let's say even in cases where it's normal for us to greet each other with hugs, the average length of our hugs is like 5 seconds, and oxytocin doesn't get released until something like 20. So we're very much, as a culture, not experiencing a lot of the benefits of touch. But I would say that touch is a form of vulnerability, and vulnerability is easier when you feel an emotional connection with another person, obviously. ENFJs find it easier to feel those connections more frequently. And so I would say there's a desire for touch more frequently, that then is frequently frustrated by the culture in which we live, which isn't neurotic about it, but we're mostly just awkward about it. We haven't really, which I would say is actually part of the same kind of bias I was talking about with us being overly intellectual, is that we don't trust the intuitive and emotional aspects of experience. So the parts of, and we don't trust our physical aspects of experience. We're very much divided from our bodies. So when your body or emotions or intuition is saying, hey, this person needs a hug, or you need a hug, or you need to put your hand on their hand or something, we don't trust that part of ourselves very frequently.
Yeah, I think that's spot on too, because honestly, like the theory, I put like a theory right there. I said, so my theory as of just a few days ago from when I wrote this, now is actually the act of a physical hug, SE, is symbolic of the empathy, warmth, and meaning someone may have to us, and I. And it is a socially acceptable way to express this, FE. So in essence, a quick and effortless way to symbolically yet physically express the deep emotion we may have for another individual. Just a theory, shrugs. Which I think that, I think that you even alluded to this too after you read it in your response. It's like the most socially appropriate way to express the depth of appreciation and love for a person right now is a hug. Well, technically not right now, like with COVID and everything. At the time of us like reading, it's just like goodness. But yeah, when you have like FESE like high up in your stack, it's like, this is the best way that I can like express to you, So I think that is like a big thing, most ENFJs that I know. In fact, personally, I don't think I can think of one so far that would be against hugs. Usually they claim to be no, I'm a hugger. So I think that like what you're saying is that's like just very true. And it's been even proven too that we need physical touch from other human beings. I forgot, don't quote me, but you can look it up. That I'm positive of, that people can actually look that up. I've done my research on that one. And it's just like when you are deprived, I think what it was is like a child who's deprived of touch from other human beings will die, because for whatever reason, like they do need that physical like affection. And so, yeah, I think there's just like an innate thing within us, and just like what you said, like our society is like they're touch starved. So, yeah, yeah. Do you have anything else to say on that one?
Just amused observations of the idea that the physical world is actually symbolic of the symbolic world rather than the other way around.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I do very vehemently believe that the spiritual world or the metaphysical is the real world. So it's like a very like I guess platonic view.
You're a very good idealist.
Yeah, yeah. Like so
Mind is
whatever happens
fundamental.
in the spirit, whatever happens in the spirit happens before it happens in the physical. Yeah, but I guess in this case, yeah.
Would
So it's like,
would love you.
yeah. Well, so in this case, it's like no, like in this case, like this was already manifested in the spirit realm in the air, and now we're just trying to like manifest it physically. We're probably losing people now, aren't we?
You don't want me to go into how in Jewish Kabbalah the body is the way for God to express God's self. Let's go to your fourth point. You said we love when people show interest in what we have to say.
Mhm.
When they take the time to actually listen to us and understand us as a person, it means the absolute world. So obviously, this is an interesting and humorous one because everyone likes when people listen to what they have to say.
Right.
But I would say specifically with ENFJs, there are so many thoughts they're developing and experiences they're developing internally as they develop their NI that to them are very natural to express externally. Like I would say that that's our most natural form of processing information, which is actually the case for a lot of people. They think by talking, but
Mhm.
especially for people who have a very strong NI developing and whose normal means of interaction with the world is FE. So, for example, in order to get myself to journal, I had to start recording what I would just say instead of writing it down because I had so many things going through my head and I was so used to processing them by talking with other people that I had to just keep the same audio medium in order to journal effectively. So it's sort of like FE is the valve that releases all the built up thoughts internally, and that's how we have to express it. I would say to the second part, when they take time to actually listen to us and understand us as a person, again, that's a craving in every person's heart to be truly understood and accepted. With ENFJs, I think they feel that particularly strongly because they, I've been trying to think of a better metaphor than us wearing masks, because the reality is that it's like I think we've used this description before where we shine a light on different aspects of ourselves or pull back the curtains on different aspects of ourselves depending on who we're with. And every piece or facet of ourselves that we're revealing in a particular situation is a genuine, authentic part of ourselves, but we tend to reveal the part that is most fitting to the situation or to helping the person in the situation or to what is likely to be accepted by the other person. So very frequently that one facet that has been unveiled for that specific situation gets mistaken for the whole gem, for the whole person.
Yeah.
So we often feel as if we're not that there's not a lot of people we can just unveil everything with and show the entirety of ourselves to. So when someone is interested in that, it is incredibly helpful. And to me in particular, to use a specific example of how this manifested in my life, I was saying earlier that I'd spent a lot of my teenage and early 20s years trying to very extensively develop the intellectual understanding of reality and catalog everything. And so a lot of my conversations were about these ideas that I had been thinking about. And one of my best friends, who herself is an INFJ, during a conversation recently, like within the last few months, told me that she was enjoying all the intellectual ideas that I was describing, but that she really wanted to know about how they affected me personally and how they related to my personality and who I was. And I hadn't even realized I wasn't revealing that part of myself, and that I
Exactly.
was staying in the ideas. And it just was a random part of the conversation, but it stuck with me very, very deeply,
Hmm.
uh, that someone was interested in that. And I don't think I had realized how much I wasn't even getting in connection with who I truly was,
Mm,
uh,
mm. Yeah,
until that.
dude. Yeah, that's real. It reminds me of the video that I made, nuanced nudity, where
Mhm.
pretty much it was a response to Carolyn Sikowski's video of on the ENFJ pivot. That's what she called it, where essentially ENFJs do a thing where if you ask them to say what they actually think about something and how something affected them or whatever, just to make something like personal, then it seems like she was pretty much saying that they're so good at being able to make everybody else feel a certain type of way, and get them to open up and share all of that. But then when you try to get to know them, then they pivot away. And somehow it's like, wait a minute, we're talking about everybody else again. And I put like a full out response in that video, the nuanced nudity video, which essentially could be wrapped up in the quote that the same naked body can turn off many people and disgust them, and also arouse many people. And so it's all about like knowing, like, okay, who can I actually show my figuratively naked body to?
Who will
And
be accepting? Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. And so when it comes to that, I think that we are personally like very good listeners for other people, because we often know that we can listen to them and we can accept. I appreciate all naked bodies figuratively, but it's like, okay, well, if I start taking off mine, then are you gonna laugh at my scars? Are you gonna start like, are you gonna make a face at my blemishes? Are you going like, what exactly am I gonna get from you? When I show you when I start taking off mine, like, will you accept the blemishes? Will you be able to admire, the scars, all of this other stuff? Because if not, it's like, I can guarantee you that I'll do that for you, but you might not do that for me. And now I think that you froze as well.
Am I back?
Okay. Yes, you're back now.
Cool.
Okay, cool. So yeah, that was pretty much like what I was saying. It's like, like we can provide that space for them, for other people, but it seems like it's a lot harder to believe that other people will be able to provide that same space for us. But when they do prove that, then we love it. So just because we're like super good listeners to you and everything like that, and we can probably come off as like, oh, we're not trying to talk about ourselves and all of that, doesn't mean that when it's with the right people and we trust you enough that we won't actually enjoy doing that, because that's what intimacy is. It's being able to share both, like, where we're coming from and then where the other person's coming from also.
And I would add to that that the fear of sharing or the reluctance to share, at least in my experience, often doesn't have to do with thinking that specific person will be judgmental. It's occasionally the case, but most of the time, it's a general hesitancy to be vulnerable
Mm.
that is non-specific to the person, and so the default mode is to not open up. And I suspect that might be connected, or that might be different depending on someone's like Enneagram type, for example. I know that for me, a lot of the fears that come along with being a 3 are the motivating factor behind not being vulnerable, generally speaking.
Mm.
And I suspect that whatever your core fears are, as Enneagram might describe, could be contributing to that. But yeah,
Mm.
just I want to say that because if you have an ENFJ in your life and you don't feel like they're opening up, I would say it's possible that there's something about you specifically. Always self-examination is always helpful, but it's probably far more likely that they have a general fear of being vulnerable for some internal psychological reason.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's pretty much like a big thing for a lot of ENFJs. Just like you said, especially Enneagram 3. And even for me as a 9, like we're known as like self-forgetting. So it's almost like I just genuinely forgot, so there's that too.
You said words of affirmation and appreciation tend to be our greatest currency. We love to receive, but we would prefer not to ask for it or make it evident we long for it and risk appearing needy. This is a very interesting one because words of affirmation is pretty far down on the list of love languages for me.
Mm.
But, and usually when I've received them in the past, wait, hang on, I gotta organize my thoughts. When I've received them in the past, it's usually been that like spotlight is on me awkwardness of like, I don't know how to react to this. And then the other two ways I've experienced them is one, I had a friend who told me that from now on I had to reply like arrogantly with I know every time someone gives me a compliment. And it was an interesting experiment because it worked to get me to actually open up and hear and receive the compliment. Even though, so on the outside, I'd be like, oh, I know. But on the inside, I'm like, ah.
That's funny. That's how my INTJ roommate is. Like that's
oh yeah,
literally how she is. Like when I first met her, then she took off her glasses, and that was the first time that I realized that she has like really light brown eyes, and they're really pretty. And I told her like this was like years ago, and I was just like, "Wow, you have really pretty eyes," and she's like, "I know." I'm like, "Okay." and then we had this whole conversation about like, yeah, why should I say thank you? She was like, she was being funny, but she also like, this is really her logic. It's like, why should I say thank you to somebody for complimenting me? Like, you should be thanking me because I blessed you.
I brought my beautiful eyes into your life.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's fair logic. That's fair logic. Yeah,
I think that the other this may be specific to me actually. So I want to hear your experience with the words of affirmation. One of the reasons that they've often not gotten through to me has to do with like my struggles as a 3, where I tend to have a very negative or self-critical image. So people can say words and intellectually I recognize, oh, that's true, but it doesn't get past the outer shell. And I don't feel the words like moving into my heart, and I don't feel myself accepting them and, like really taking them in. I would say that I've had to go for a roundabout method with this one, where I like one of my current, you could classify it as personal or spiritual beliefs, is that if you try to collect reasons to love yourself, all you do is create targets for the self-critical part of your mind to criticize you on once you're not living up to those reasons in the moment. Wow. So I think that it's a general principle that love has no reasons. Like love just shines by itself. You couldn't ask a mother to give, a list of all the reasons she loves her child. So I think I've come to see words as an opportunity, words of affirmation as an opportunity to rejoice at the beauty another person is seeing in me, without assigning like identity or oh, look at me, I'm so great, or oh, finally, I'm glad I'm good, to that experience of being complimented. Let's say it's sort of like when someone says, oh, wow, that's a really beautiful cathedral, or that's a really beautiful sunset, you don't go, oh, thank you. It's like, no, you just rejoice that they can experience beauty there. And you can actually look at yourself the same way, where you're like, I'm glad there's beauty here. I don't attach my value to it.
Yeah.
But so that frees me up to actually rejoice that the other person is experiencing something enjoyable in our interaction.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. Because, well, what I was going to bring up actually was I think that a lot of people who do struggle with that, well, okay, number one, as soon as we read that one, then I was like, oh man, when did I write this article? Because I feel like I probably wouldn't have added that one with my added information now. So actually, yeah, that's something that's like, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't speak for all ENFJs when it comes to like that one. So it's interesting that you did say like, oh yeah, for me, that's not really a thing.
Look at you continuing to grow.
Exactly, right? And I admit it. But at the same time, I do also feel like, just like even recently, like just a few minutes ago in this video, like when I was telling you, like I wouldn't say something that I don't mean. And you're like, oh, I just want you to know, like whatever you are saying, like it's doing its job. That was words of affirmation to you, right? How did that affect you? I don't even remember what exactly I said, but I do know that I meant it. But
it's sort of like, it's sort of a thing that doesn't immediately sink in, but presents opportunities for realization later. And the realization, I don't, like I've said, I don't think is helpful if you're trying to like later go back and be like, oh, people have said these things about me, that's why I should love myself.
right.
That might be helpful for some people. I've found that for me, that just creates more opportunities for self-criticism when I'm no longer living up to that new standard.
I think
But
that is a very 3 thing. That makes sense.
yeah, I would suspect so. But it does later create opportunities for where I can see beauty without identifying with it, and where I can better serve other people. Because if I'm I don't often perceive the times that I'm teaching or conveying information in order to teach as being helpful to other people, because, well, I'm not entirely sure why. I just don't have an automatic perception that what I say is going to be helpful. And so that's made me very hesitant about using the gifts for teaching that I have. But when I hear from other people feedback that's like, hey, you doing this was helpful, whether it's teaching or some other gift, that gives me the opportunity to look more objectively at those gifts and be like, okay, this is helpful to other people.
Right.
Even if I don't automatically feel that, I can take a step back and see, okay, no, the evidence is there that this is actually helping others, and therefore this is a way I can be of service to others. And that also helps with self-acceptance, because I often find difficulty in accepting myself as a teacher. But if I can recognize that there are times where it's appropriate for me to play that role, and it's helpful for me to play that role, then rather than trying to accept myself as a teacher, as a label that gives me some kind of self-confidence or value or self-love, it is an opportunity to accept it as, this is a way I can be of service to others and an aspect of reality that's beautiful.
Got it. Okay. That makes total sense. Huh. Gotcha. Well, that's good to know. All right. I think I don't have anything more to say on that. We can go to 6. But thanks for sharing that, man.
Sure. By the way, I do very much enjoy seeing you process ideas.
In real time, right? It's just
Yes.
like, oh goodness, like, like I literally have to stop my mind.
I mean, man, I feel like that's where the beautiful stuff happens, like in between words,
Yeah, because it's just like, I'm just like, my NI is like, no, stop, like, stop. We gotta discuss that later. So I might hit you up like after the video, or like 3 days from now. I'm like, yo, Emrys, when you shared this, or as I'm editing it, it's like, I think boom, 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 boom. And then we might have part 3. No, I'm kidding. But no, seriously, I appreciate you sharing that, for real. I like learning.
Don't tease the trilogy and the sequel until you're sure you've got it.
Right.
Until you're sure you've got it cleared.
Exactly.
We can have an after credit scene. It's fine. Ooh, this is a spicy one.
Yes.
We may appear very
as a sexual 3.
Ooh, deep. But yes, we may appear very flirty, but in all honesty, we are just really nice. healthy ENFJs, that is. I know it's hard to distinguish at times, but just consider that before thinking an ENFJ wants you. So
Winky face.
I am fascinated to
Winky
find
face.
out if we will end up agreeing or disagreeing on this one. Because the first thing that I notice is consider that before thinking an ENFJ wants you. To me, flirting is not an automatic indicator of a desire for romantic or sexual interaction.
Yes.
It can be, obviously, and frequently is, but perhaps this is my sexual 3 nature. I also see flirting as a game.
Yep.
If participants in the game are on the same page about what the flirting means.
Mhm.
I'm not cool with flirting with someone who thinks it's leading to romance or sex when that's not the case from the other side. But if both see it as a game that's playful and enjoyable for its own sake, then it's a great social little game.
Yes.
I would say that I'm trying to think of the aspects of ENFJ communication that come across as flirty, and add to this list if any others come to your mind. But we tend to zero in very intensely on listening to people, which to illustrate, a friend of mine recently told me that I have 2 different ways of making eye contact with people. One of them is very I have at least 2 in casual conversation. I have actually plenty more, but
you just noticed too.
Yeah, I was like, I've never shown you the other 5 types of eye contact, but okay. But she basically described that there was a more relaxed eye contact that was listening, but from a very relaxed place. Mm-hmm. And then there was one that she described as you know how Cyclops in X-Men has super intense eye beams that get focused down very narrowly. She was normally your attention is on the entire social scene, in this big spread out arc, and then you can go from that to taking all that energy and putting it right on one person eye contact. And that was very intense.
Yes
I've since learned that level of intensity also works very well if you're trying to interact with the aspect of the eyes being a window to the soul, because you'll see things in the eyes of the other person about them in ways that you couldn't describe what the exact physical changes or differences in appearance are, but you'll see things about them in their eyes if you put that level of intensity on them. So I would say that kind of eye contact and several of the other more intense kinds that ENFJs frequently use can be misconstrued as romantic interest. And then we also tend to be very playful in general in social situations. And so that can be construed as flirting. And then I would say that we also have a very strong connection with our SE. So we, as all my talking with my hands would indicate, we also integrate our physical responses to the person very strongly in our interactions. You're lounging back on the couch like this right now, and add a flirtatious smolder to that, and you're well into flirting territory, right? But that's a very natural part for you, and you may I'm using you as an example, so I don't mean to make you uncomfortable, but we may do that also as a playful or joking thing where you may be doing this, and then just be
put a leg up.
Yeah, and then you may do the flirtatious movement or words or facial expression as a joking way of interacting or a playful way of interacting. Right. So I would say all of that's just very normal to us. And I have a lot of sympathy for people to whom that's not normal, because I hear people all the time being oh, flirting is a very confusing and strange thing. And I'm okay, it doesn't seem like it to me unless you're on a really high level where both people are trying to manipulate each other and playing the game very strongly. But I think all of that can be misconstrued. And I would end this little TED Talk section by being ask the person for clarity. I don't know if this is an ENFJ thing specifically, but I would say that I see clear or even blunt interaction in relationships to be very, very important, to the point where anytime I grew up in the church receiving a lot of advice about marriage, and I heard very frequently people be like, well, you're going to need to like be able to anticipate when someone wants something specific, or like when they don't want to do something but they won't say. And to me, I'm like, yeah, I'll develop that skill, because there's times that everyone is uncomfortable speaking up, but people presented that as like a normal part of healthy relationships. And to me, I was like, well, I don't want a relationship like that. I want us to be very straightforward with each other, because the level of confusion and distress that can happen without being very blunt and straightforward about our desires and perspectives is astronomical.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
what are
Why
your
would you
thoughts on
create?
this?
Yeah, it's like, why would you create like unnecessary misunderstanding? Um,
Mhm.
but I do also like playing coy. So one of the things
Yes. Okay.
that,
Actually, I was going to say real quick, the playing coy for me is fantastic, and the game is fantastic once there's a level of trust established.
exactly.
Once you know you're not going to hurt each other, once you know you're not manipulating each other, once you know you can communicate clearly, then you can go all day with the flirtation
Right.
games and stuff. But to me, there needs to be that foundation before I'm comfortable with that, or at
Mhm.
least knowing that the other person is in a very healthy place, so
Yes.
there's not the risk for suffering.
Yes, yes, 100%. That's exactly it. I tweeted back in, let's see, 5/29/19. I'm so bad with things. Is that May? January, February, March, April, May. Yeah, that's May.
Mm,
Anyway,
well
I
done.
tweeted on May 29th, 2019. Like a skilled dancer who enjoys occasionally meeting another skilled dancer to share the floor with, I think myself a skilled conversationalist that gets a high off of creative interactions, including banter, wit, light flirting, sarcasm, etc. It's just enthralling. And then I included a scene from the movie Hitch. For those who want to, go and check it out. Like it was Hitch and Eva Mendes's character. I believe her name was Sarah. If you literally search on YouTube, I would put it here, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to get copyrighted. So maybe I won't. But maybe I put it in anyway, and then I just cut this part out. We'll see. But if you search up on YouTube, like Hitch meets Sarah or something like that, it'll show up. And I put like as the additional tweet, still one of my absolute favorite examples of this pure conversational euphoria, ebullience, ecstasy, even perhaps all the above. And there was nothing at all sexual about the interaction, but it was just very witty, clever. It was just, to me as a writer, I just really appreciated whoever wrote that part of the script. And I think that when that happens in real life, it's amazing, because it's like you found somebody who's like able to meet you with that. And sometimes even if they're not up to your level, sure, it's just like we're freaking FE DOMs, and then we're yeah. So it's like, again, we're very interested in the interpersonal. So it's like, oh, I just want to play with this. I just want to kind of see like where this will go. But obviously, like, once again, we don't want to do that. Just like what you're saying, you want to establish trust. We don't want to do that with somebody who's like actually going to catch feelings for us, because then that's harmful. But flirting is, to me, also like a game. It's fun. And I think that, yeah, that's something that, like, now, again, looking back at that blog, it's like, again, like, I think that, and Jamila's told me this, she said that I'm like highly flirtatious, and I agree with her. So almost in a way, like, I'm contradicting, but kind of like what you're saying, I'm not flirting with you in the sense that I'm trying to express romantic interest in you, or even erotic interest in you. I'm just flirting a lot of times just to play. It's like, oh, I have a little toy here, and I just want to play with it. And you should play with yours too. If you're equally as skilled, or you want to continue to sharpen your skills, like, hey, let's flirt with each other. It reminds me of like the Greek love language, the Greek love, ludus, which is seen as very flirtatious and all of that. But it's funny because out of the 8 Greek loves, like, that's seen as like the most flirty and playful. And it can be seen as anything along the lines of like dancing with a partner, to even guys just at the bar, riffing on each other. That's considered flirting with each other. And it's just like, what? And it's like, yeah, flirting doesn't always, once again, like those guys at the bar that are riffing at each other. It's like, yo, Emrys, your mustache. I don't know what else. But yeah, just stuff like
No, please, I want to hear your hot take on my mustache.
My hot take on your mustache is that it's hot. There it is. But at like, like when you have those kind of like moments, obviously like, there's not like a romantic element to it. It's just, again, like just playful. And I think that's the point that I really meant to bring in. Like, don't be so quick to assume that we're trying to put a ring on your finger, or like even trying to get you to go into bed. And then there's also times where it's like, just honestly, we're very kind. Like if I see someone and they have a nice mustache, I will tell them, like, I don't know, like, I just feel like there's no reason to hold back compliments from people, because you never know, one compliment like could really make someone's day. And so I really don't mind like just handing out compliments, and they're always like well-intentioned in that way. And I don't just like, I don't ever say compliments that I don't mean. I never say that, because then that cheapens it. To me, it's not about how many compliments I give. It's about the honesty behind them. So yeah, but some people could, again, like they could see that as flirting. And I guess once again, it depends on like how you define flirting. So yeah.
The how you define it makes me think of your analogy in a particular way, because you described it as a dance in that tweet. And I think that with the combination of FE and NI, and this may be specific to ENFJs who are writers or particularly linguistic, I see language as like a constantly moving dance of color and nuance and meaning. And when I'm writing, I'm like stepping into that dance. And to see another person who's capable of stepping into that dance and meeting me in that place is fantastic.
I totally agree. Yeah, I dabble with RPing like online and everything. So being able to like write stories with another person is just very euphoric for me, because it's almost like improv. I hate improv in real time, like in real life, like, oh no, what do I do now kind of thing. Like I don't like that. Personally, I think that's a very high SE, high NE kind of thing. But when writing, and it's like, okay, we just have a general plot. We don't know what's going to happen here. But we both just have our characters and we're just going to see where the story takes us. I think that's really fun. And when you have a good writer, it's just like amazing. So yeah, number 7.
Number 7. Ask us every now and then how you could be a better friend or partner to us, or in what ways you can meet our needs. Oof, yeah. We heavily appreciate that, because as previously stated, we don't like to vocalize it often, some if ever, so we can avoid coming off as selfish or needy. Some of us may even try to get you to do this by setting an example and doing it first. But from my experience, it's unfortunately not always reciprocated afterwards. Yes, the number of times that I've gone through the little dance of asking someone a question and being genuinely interested in their answer, and not having an answer necessarily of my own, but after they're done with the answer, wishing they would ask it back. And then being like, oh, why didn't you ask it back? And then being like, that's a weird thing to do, Emrys. You're like, if you want to say the thing, just say the thing. Yeah. But yes, I think that's partly like the first intuition coming to my mind is that might be us projecting our method of interaction onto others. Yeah. Because we tend to create those open doors for others to communicate. Right. And so I think that we come to think of an open door as something that has been created and sort of strung with lights and tapestries, because that's how we create the open doors for others. We go, yes, clear signals, you can talk to me about this. And that's just not like the way that a lot of other people create open doors for conversation, because it's just not there. It could be they're not particularly good at that, or it doesn't occur to them, or they just have a different style of communication. So that being said, yes, if you ask us how you can meet our needs, one of the really important parts about that is not only does it make it easier for us to talk about them, but it makes it easier for us to accept them. Because
Mm,
remember that we're relating to other people, we're relating to emotions through FE,
right.
where emotions are processed through how they affect the group and how they relate to the group, as opposed to something like FI, where it's like there's a sort of automatic validity attributed to one's internal emotions in FI. That's not necessarily there in FE.
Mhm.
So by bringing it out into the social scape, you confer a certain amount of validity to the emotion that the ENFJ is able to then experience and adopt, because they have been able to process the emotion and accept the emotion through their way of relating to emotions. FE.
Yes, yes, yes. Oh man, the way that you put things, all I'm gonna do is just echo what you said, and there's gonna be like no reason to do that. But
Please
that
do. Your
oh,
own unique spin
explain
on it will probably like give insights to different people. So please do.
it. That well, honestly, I definitely did. I definitely do agree. It's like, yeah, I think that we are projecting sometimes, like when we see things in that way. It's like, oh, because I catch myself do that too. It's like, wonder why this person didn't, ask me right back. Which again, like I'm projecting because the way that I am, honestly, is that's how it is. Like if somebody asks me like, oh, how are you doing, or how was your day, or something, I know this is gonna sound rude, but just being honest, like if I will tell you, sure, I'll answer your question, but if I don't care, then I'm not gonna ask you that question back. I might ask you something else that I actually care about. But they talk about like FE niceties and everything. I'm not gonna subject myself to quote unquote that nicety once again if I don't care. I feel like that's doing you a disservice, and that's when FE becomes fake. I'd rather want to share something that's like actually genuine. So sometimes I'd even think to myself like, oh, maybe like the person just wasn't interested in knowing the answer to, and if that's the case, it's like I might wonder like, I wonder why aren't interested. But at the same time, okay, whatever, I guess, I'll just let that kind of go. And I think that sometimes, maybe it is just like I notice that you ask all the time, like before you share your perspective on things. Like even when I feel like it's obvious, like, hey, Emrys, I'm sending this to you to hear your thoughts or whatever like that. But you still like are like, do you want my thoughts? And I'm like, yeah, I respect that. I respect that you do that. So I think that that's kind of like the same thing. Like sometimes we should maybe in such a situation like that, we shouldn't ask, okay, do you want to hear what my favorite season is? Like maybe not the best thing, but like maybe we should be like, oh no, like, yeah, I totally get that. Like actually, I really, I think that summer is cool too, but I really like winter because boom, boom, I don't know. So just a smooth way to kind of like throw that in there. And then if they probe deeper, then you can start sharing more. But I guess sometimes we do have to open up the door a little bit for them because maybe they're trying to also respect our privacy. So
I would also say if you're an blah, 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 words are hard. If you are an ENFJ who is experiencing that a lot, I would suggest that you might need to dedicate more time to talking with people who do ask you to open up that way or who do connect to you on those deeper levels, because it's
yeah,
very easy for us to scatter all of our time and attention across a somewhat randomized set of interactions without being intentional about who we're interacting with and why and how often. And I've noticed you've been really good at doing that lately, where you've been willing to say, okay, I know that these are people I can interact with who I can very clearly help. And these are people who I interact with who very much help me and help me recharge. So I'm going to intentionally dedicate more time and effort into interacting with those two groups of people. And that may mean that I either have to just allow other things to fall by the wayside, or that I have to actively set aside other sets of interactions, or even like reduce the amount that I interact with other friends in order to make room for that.
yes, 100%. And that's been one of the biggest tips, life lessons I've ever experienced. And I'm so grateful for that because now my energy is so still now. Like it's so like centered. And I really, really appreciate that because now I don't feel nearly any monkey mind kind of thing, like at all. Sometimes things get like a little bit stacked up and I'm like, okay. But thankfully I've created a environment with people where like I don't have people who are like incessantly rushing me to respond to them or like to engage with them. And like, you know, I'm able to interact with them like at my own leisure. And I've been just tending to the garden the way that I kind of wanted, like I kind of always wanted to. And that's been great. So yeah, man, I agree. We're almost through these. 8. Speaking of agree.
If you disagree with an opinion of ours, take the time to see our perspective first. Show us that you have, and then gently help us see yours. The latter should be easy if the first 2 steps are done properly and the ENFJ has healthy or developed an I. We value accuracy, but not if the root there is condescension.
Mm.
Yes, this is a very interesting one because it's essentially offering a particular method to people whose goal is to help us see a different perspective.
Right.
And if that's, first of all, if that's not particularly your desire, I would say that's perfectly okay. A lot of people in conversation are processing their own thoughts about things or expressing emotions they haven't had the opportunity to express, even if that's just frustration. Like we could be on 2 different sides of a religious or political divide. And if you're using the conversation as an opportunity to simply vent frustration about the side that I belong to, I see that as not particularly helpful for, you know, mutual understanding or movement forward
Right.
towards a solution, but it's still, I would still see it as perfectly acceptable. Like, it's not, I don't come from a place of being like, this is what you need to do. That's my, you know, much lower level of shepherd archetype. And I think that oftentimes emotions are more easily processed out of the body if they are expressed to another person. So
Yeah.
as far as I'm concerned, if you're venting at me, like I consider that an honor.
Yeah.
Now
Absolutely.
I may have to take a lot of personal effort and time to make sure that my emotional boundaries are very strong, because otherwise I may end up taking on a lot of the emotional energy you're giving off.
Yes.
But that's my responsibility. That's
Right.
not necessarily, you know, you need to feel guilty that you infringed on me.
Right. Exactly.
That being said, if your desire is to get us to see a different point of view, this is an excellent method of doing so. There are so many times when I've been the other one in the conversation where I'm still processing through my own thoughts, or I haven't been willing to be accepting of my own thoughts or feelings on a subject. And I'm attempting to, like we were saying before, express them in FE to experience acceptance by bringing them into the social scene. And there are many times that I forget to, you know, you can't listen if you're speaking. You can't, if we're all carrying little boxes that contain our identities, you can't look into someone else's unless you put yours down for a minute. The reason that this is so important is that there's a few of them, that we're highly sensitive to emotional tension or conflict. So it can be difficult for us to see another perspective. And that includes whether you're in conflict with us or whether you're in conflict with others. Like the number of times that I've had difficulty hearing and accepting an alternate perspective because the person was being, in my perception, like not particularly caring or gentle with other people is just countless, where I'm like, you know, I like what you're saying, but if you're going to not be gentle with other people, I'm not listening to you. And so I would say this is a really good example of, like, basically ENFJs, like anyone else, have plenty of barriers between us listening to you and understanding you. Even though we're really good at FE and stuff, and we're judgers, we have very strong feelings about things. So if you want us to see your perspective, can be super helpful to communicate that you accept our perspective, and then that often gets out of the way the attempt at getting into FE, those things that we want to experience acceptance for. And then we're immediately open to being more accepting because we don't have this like internal struggle of not accepting even our own perspectives. And then as far as the condescension, remember that our NI is going to immediately see the perspectives of other people, and our FE is going to immediately want to put at ease any potential conflict between those perspectives. So when you're being very conflicting with another perspective, especially if it's condescending to that perspective, that immediately puts us on the defensive and being like, I don't trust you. You can't like express your perspective in a way that doesn't attack other people.
Yes, exactly. I 100% agree with that, because that's kind of like the biggest thing. It's like what we ultimately do want is unity. And that goes for, in my opinion, even like the most harsh of situations. I think I told a story to y'all before, where I was a server, and I was hearing from all of my coworkers, like, do you see that table over there of the 4 elderly people? They're talking about slavery and this, that, and like how like slavery was in the Bible and blah, blah, blah. And they're like laughing about it. And they were getting upset on my behalf. They were all white. And it's like, and I know that, like, like it was like a respectful thing. Like I definitely believe that they were like actually upset. And I did originally like go and like I took a picture of the table sneakily and I posted it on Twitter, and I was just like, and this was probably premature of me, but I was just like, wow, I can't believe that we still have people like this around, just openly talking about like slavery and laughing about it, whatever. But then about like 10 minutes after I posted that picture, I was like, you know what? Because I was genuinely curious, and I went and I kneeled by their table and I was like, hey, I do not mean to interrupt you guys. I not mean like whatever. And they had already paid their bills, so thankfully they were good. I wasn't about to interfere with another server's tip, but I was like, I just really want to understand. Like, I overheard what you guys are saying, and I just really wanted to understand like where you guys are coming from. And they were very kind, actually. They were explaining like where they're coming from. They're like, yeah, like slavery's been around for years, like even before what America did. And I broke down a few things to them. I was like, well, even biblical slavery was different. Like, they were freed after 7 years. It had nothing to do with their race and them being lesser, but rather they were trying to like get out of debt. And they were treated way better than slaves here in America were, just a lot of different stuff over there. And yeah, it was a really actually like good conversation. Nobody interrupted each other. Nobody was condescending to each other. And then by the end, they gave me a handshake and everything. And they said like they've never spoken to a person of color who's able to hold themselves well in this way. And all of that. And I was honored. I was like very glad. And then everybody came like after they left, like, I cannot believe that you just went and did that and everything. And it wasn't anything to gloat and show for, but it was just more like, no, I genuinely am like, why do people believe what they believe? And there has to be a reason. Maybe they experienced like, there are like really like, hostile people of color, just like there's hostile people of not color, like there's just it is what it is, but like
yes, those really hostile clear people
yes
who have no color.
yes, exactly. My whole thing is just like, what's the worldview these people are coming from, and me being able to like try to understand their perspective then helps me to, instead of like just combating it with aggression, now it's able to like, hey, let's put all of our weapons down and let's just have a civil conversation, come to an understanding. I do believe that there's some people who, if I approached them like that, they just would have like been upset, whatever. And then I just immediately, honestly, that's where I judge them. Honestly, I'm just, oh, this person's a bigot. I'm not going to waste my time with this person. Like, as long as they're not going around lynching people, I guess I don't really care, but like, just hold on to whatever opinion that you have, whatever. But if they seem open to be able to discuss whatever, then cool. So yeah. All right.
I'm really proud of you for doing that. And
thanks, man.
It's not, I think there's another relevant connection to this, eighth point, that there are different personal, cultural, and situational ways of communicating that are really relevant here. And it's not really fair or loving of us to expect someone to automatically change their way of communicating to ours in order to be heard.
Yeah.
Like the people who were, let's say there were people who would have like yelled at that table of people
Yeah.
in anger, like they may be communicating something just as equally valid. And then to demand, like, I'm not saying you're doing this, but like oftentimes our culture demands that they come and sit at the debate table and be very like calm and collected and stuff before they're heard. That's extremely unfair and extremely, it makes an assumption that like one cultural way of communicating is automatically more valid than another. And so I have an extra amount of admiration for you being willing to play the game of being very civil when there's no obligation to do that. Like I say that because a lot of times people will be like, will basically demand what you did. And people can do that on a personal level, a cultural level, or a societal level, or whatever, and demand, like in this, that might happen connected to this question where it's like, well, unless you communicate to me this way, I'm not listening.
Right.
And it's like, you can do that if you want, but your way of communicating is going to be one of billions.
Right.
So if you want to actually experience communication and building something constructive, we have to open ourselves up to different ways of communicating. And the reason that I highlight that is that that's very often very hard for people to do, because people will look at a debate on CNN and be like, or bad example, a debate on a civil platform and be like, that is the proper way to have conversations. And it's like, that's a very specific historical and cultural and societal method that, you've just implied invalidation of like the billions of other methods that have been used in other times and places. So like, widen your definition of civil communication a little bit and see if instead of assuming the motivations of other people.
Yeah, no, I feel you. Actually, I do kind of fall a little bit into that category. Like, I do believe, like, personally, I'm like, well, like, yeah, that's why I always talk about like Jubilee's middle ground. I love how when they come together and then they're just sharing their thoughts and their perspectives in a very civil manner, whatever. Because to me, it's like, okay, that's the best way that these people are actually listening to each other. I understand that people get passionate and they get riled up. And I'm not saying not to have that, like, oh, you need to calm down. I'm not saying that. But like, I guess when people are not listening to each other, that's where it really bothers me. Like ad hominem are being thrown around. Like, yeah, well, that's because you racist. Like, no, that's not going to help the situation, but you can express you can attack the idea. Like, I just really hate the idea of racism and like, get riled up there. But then as soon as you start like gearing it toward the person, now you're bringing up the person's defenses. And so then the person's going to start retaliating, and then nobody's going to really want to listen to each other, in my opinion. So I think that as long as you're listening to each other and nobody's afraid to lose face or trying to make the other person lose face, then it's effective conversation, in my opinion. Yeah.
And I think that I think what I'm addressing is specifically when someone, let's say they're being more aggressive than is normally socially accepted there, like that is an opportunity to take the listening role on yourself and see if there's something that they're communicating that you're not hearing. And by doing so, you afford the greatest possibility that they will also take a listening role. But we often miss that. We often think that when someone's being aggressive, that they're not communicating anything important that we need to listen to. And they often are. So yeah, I would say it's like, I agree with your standard on like, listening is the important guiding principle. And I think it's that we often find it hard to adopt that guiding principle for ourselves when other people aren't adopting it.
Yeah, definitely agree.
9. Your favorite number? I don't actually know if it's your favorite number. I don't know if you even have
Funny enough, It's 3.
Your favorite number is 3?
Yes.
Oh,
The
I knew I was having an impact.
The Holy Trinity and Allen Iverson, the basketball player.
Yes. The two essential components of any theology. Oh, well, here you go. Number 9 is 3 threes. So.
Oh, yes, that's,
yeah.
whoa. That's funny.
Fun fact, that's probably why it has a commonly revered place in Norse mythology. Yeah, random. Okay, number 9. Please avoid reminding us that we are or can be talkative. We usually know this, and we just simply can't help it when we get passionate and or excited, but also understand that we usually only share such thoughts, feelings, and rants with those we trust, hold dear, and believe actually care to hear what we have to say. Don't taint that. This is another interesting one that I'm curious how much it's an ENFJ trait and how much it's a trait of people who are strongly leaning toward an intellectual perspective, because from my understanding, people who have a tendency toward intellectualism basically go over every experience with a fine-tooth comb and find every nuance in the experience, which, by the way, is probably one of the reasons that highly intellectual people can be particularly prone to like depression, because they're over analyzing every single experience that happens, or let's not say over analyzing, they're intensively analyzing, and that can give a lot to process. It gives a lot of data feedback. So yes, I would say if you want to love ENFJs who are like this in your life, who may be particularly prone to it because of NI and FE, which again likes to go on rants, then yes, please I would say communicate to us when it is helpful to you for us to go on rants, and when it is like, hey, you know, I got things I have to get done right now. I want to listen, but I just don't have the time to sit down and have this 30-minute conversation right now. Because usually
or even the interest. Like if you don't have the interest, and also.
Oh yes, please. If you're like not interested, please don't just sit there and like, you know, suffer through it. Like we genuinely, and especially because we'll feel it. Like we'll usually know you're not really interested. But there can be confusion there if you've somehow communicated in another way that you normally would be interested. And then we're like, okay, I'm picking up on disinterest, but is there something wrong here? So yeah, I would also say that, again, like I was talking about with the need to externalize things, or it being easier to validate and accept our own thoughts and feelings when we externalize them, the rants are often as much emotional processing as they are an attempt to communicate a concept. So we're often going on a rant because we have very intense feelings attached to those things, and we're trying to sort through them and allow ourselves to experience them and make good use of them, rather than them just kind of festering internally and getting confused. So yeah, and I would finish by saying, like, this can also be something where an ENFJ may have like 10 rants in them that they haven't gotten the opportunity to say to anyone. I know that so yeah, we both vibe with that. For me, like, having just gone through a year-long deconstruction and reconstruction process of my philosophy and faith, there's probably like 30 top rants in me that I haven't expressed. And I use that as an illustration of how the rants can be attached to very, very challenging emotions. So if you listen, you're being of great service to your loved one by allowing them to express that. So please go ahead. What
no, I was just going to say, like, first of all, definitely I second everything that you said. And secondly, like, it's just really emphasized, like, probably have like 10 rants, but haven't shared those with like anyone else. Like, to me, I think that if, again, personally, I believe that if somebody thinks that I'm very talkative or like I talk a lot, then that should be an indicator that I trust that person. Because in all sincere honesty, like, you'd be surprised how many coworkers that I have that'd be like, really, Denzel? Like, And honestly, it's because I've noticed like, oh, when I tried to talk to this coworker, then they weren't as excitable. They weren't like as interested. They go, oh, that's cool, Denzel, and they just move on. I'm not
Putting
going
out the
to,
FE feelers and being like, nope, not there.
exactly. I'm not going to quote unquote cast my pearls to swine. You know what I mean? So it's like I honestly have absolutely no problem with being quiet and to myself. But as a person who's deep, like I deeply long for intimacy and connection, then this is one of the ways that I'm able to seek that. I'm able to, do that. So I like to find people who actually actively enjoy listening to me, and hearing all of my thoughts about things and things that I've like taken through a fine comb, like what you've said, and then hear what they think about whatever I just thought. And then that's my way of like connecting. Like right now, what we've been doing right now is connecting. I think we've been talking for like almost 2 hours and some change right now. And it's just like, well, number one, you and I are already used to doing that in general, but now it's like on video. And it's like, I remember back in early, like, early days, like for my YouTube channel, I was like, always like, oh my gosh, people are going to complain that this video is long. But then it's like, wait a minute, this is my channel. I don't, like I don't care, because the people who really do care to listen through to the end, first of all, we have 2 times speed on here. I understand users and all of my NE friends, they say like, oh yeah, I put you on 2 times speed. My NE friends and my INTJ friends. So again, we gotta, yeah. And I'm not offended by that, because hey, you still took it in, Paradox, I'm talking to you, love you, girl. But at the same time, it's like, okay, if I'm sharing these things with you, like I got my YouTube channel because whatever I'm sharing on YouTube, I don't talk to my in real life people about. In real life, I just kind of like, I'm just staying to myself. Like, I'll like engage on the things that they want to an extent and all of that. But then I'll come on here and it's like, hey, I've been reading this book, or I've been watching this show, I've been thinking about this concept.
Man,
and
I gotta start a YouTube channel.
I know, right? Dude, you should. You really should. I would love to like, because that's, to me, it's like once I put these things out there like that, nobody's forcing anybody to subscribe to my channel. A lot of people have even commented like, yeah, I'd subscribe if, you only put out Myers-Briggs content. Well, I'm not going to only put out Myers-Briggs content. Like I'm going to put out everything that I'm thinking about, and I guess you can just listen to the ones that you want and not listen to the ones that I see the difference in views. And it's like, okay, but the people who do listen to certain ones, no matter how long, like those are to me like the intimate ones, and like I leave Easter eggs in those for people, like breadcrumbs for people to be able to follow back. And it's like, you watched my video, didn't you? Because it's the only public place that I've ever even alluded to something of that about myself. And then that's somehow I've seen people like reel me in with that, because like, oh, you've caught like an interest of mine, like you actually let me take up that much time of yours. And you're that interested in me. So now I want to invest right back in you, because it's a reciprocal thing. So yeah, but like, again, like, I think that even with this one, I remember that like one of my sister-in-laws, so don't try to pin down which one for anyone who knows them, but one of them, like, they were like,
oh, your subreddit is gonna go crazy with the fan theories.
oh man, they were like, it was some years back, and she just like said like, yeah, no, Denzel, you talk a lot or whatever. And half of me, well, 70% of me was like, ouch. And the other, like, I'm just like, dang, like, at the same time, I was just like, well, I felt like I was with family, and not just like family as in like, oh, y'all are like family by law or whatever, but it's like I was with Jamila and I was with her older brother, stuff like that. And it's just like, okay, well, like we tend to engage, like they're the two introverts of the family, and they're both ISPs. Her brother's ISTP, she's an ISFP. So of course, me being the ENFJ, I'm going to probably speak more than they will. But they were very interested, and we were all talking. But I'm the one who kind of like pushes those conversations. But if not for that, then we'll just kind of be silent for like most of the time. And I feel like that's one of the best ways like to be able to connect. Now, if I felt like they weren't interested, I wouldn't really talk, like, because again, like I won't just cast my pearls to swine. So
That
anyway,
brings
yeah,
up
like all that to say,
your
like I,
comments on this.
oh yeah, I was just gonna say like all that to say is like, yeah, I won't, like it's not hard for me to just not talk to somebody. It's not hard. But if I feel like you're actually interested, just in the same way that I'd love for you to talk to me, yeah, I'm gonna talk to you.
Definitely, yeah. Your comments about the silence brought up a tangential point for me, which is that when there is someone who's willing to listen like that, that actually opens up the opportunity for, let's say, communion in silence between myself and this other person, where there's been such acceptance and listening that I find myself able to be silent with the other person and to still feel that I'm somehow being understood or somehow communicating and somehow listening to them and understanding them without the words. But I've noticed that, at least for me, and it might be an ENFJ thing, it might be a result of, intellectual obsession for much of my life, that I often didn't reach that point until someone was willing to listen like that. And that was particularly fascinating to me because my spiritual journey and personal growth journey has been, in some ways, largely a matter of extensively exploring every possible intellectual avenue to exhaust the possibility of that being where true growth and satisfaction and joy are found. So I move out of my head and into the heart and into experience directly and into directly loving and serving others. And there's a similar progression in relationships like that, where there's it's like there's all these built up rants, and when you get to the bottom of that barrel, it's like all of that is out of the way, and now the two of you can just sit there and share your unique like, I'm a hippy dippy person, so I would say like your unique vibration, but the things about you that are unique that you just share in silence.
Yes. Oh man, that was beautifully stated. I like that. It gave this whole like imagery, like, yeah, just get all these out the barrel, and then let's sit at the bottom of the barrel and just listen to the hollow barrel. I like that a lot.
Yo, that gives me an idea for like a video where you just, I don't know if you would need the rant at the beginning or not, but where you invite people to do that with you, where you're just like sitting there in silence and inviting them to do the same.
I'm gonna do that now one day.
It might be
gonna do that one day. Like I'm just gonna be like, I'm gonna put up a live stream, like, come sit in silence with me.
It might be a special, I don't know how this would make a difference. So if you have a comment on it, let me know. But what would the difference be between you doing that with just you and you doing that with like another person in the video physically next to you? Or more people. I don't know. You can get a whole get a whole stadium of silent people.
The stadium of silence. Is this thing on? I feel like, oh man, that's a lot to think about, Emrys. Okay, I'm gonna come back to you on that one. That's a good idea.
I look forward to your reply in 3 days.
Yeah, I know, right? Because that's really something I'm going to be thinking about now. But if I give an answer right now, it's not going to be accurate. So, yeah. But okay. And last but not least, number 10.
Besides words of affirmation, besides words of appreciation and affirmation, the greatest high for us is your vulnerability. I love how true and like terrifying this sounds, but it's good. The feeling of knowing you're allowing us into the dark and murky depths of your heart and mind that few or none are able to explore is so incredibly, immeasurably, and simply exponentially rewarding to us. And we do our best to express that and keep you from regretting rewarding us with such trust. So I'm going to give my perspective of how this manifests for me, and then I would love to hear the unique way it manifests for you, because I'm guessing they might be different, but I'm not sure. For me, spent a lot of time thinking about how I want to primarily be of service to others in my life, in connection with choosing a career, in connection with how I spend my time. And one method that keeps coming back is just noticing that it's in listening to people who are ready to be vulnerable and especially are ready to make progress in their own personal growth that I find the most joy in being of service, because I see that that's where the growth primarily happens. And this was a big lesson for me, because I tended to think of the most important thing for personal or spiritual progress to be either saying or listening to long lectures on spiritual ideas and concepts. And I just remember how startling and reverberatingly obvious it was that the growth, when I saw that the growth happens in those moments of listening. And ideally, that's what therapy is, essentially. That and having a professional who can help you develop a very specific plan for you in growth. But yeah, let's say like half of therapy is that kind of listening. And I just noticed that seemed to be one of the few times where I felt deeply, deeply into a flow state and felt like I could feel and see the beauty of life to an extent that just didn't show up nearly as deeply in so many other areas. So, or no, that's inaccurate. It's more that it's like knowing that beauty and depth was there, but being in that moment with someone, that moment of vulnerability, felt like getting plunged into that beauty and it suddenly being all around you. And it also connects to like I often feel very strange about the fact that we have this barrier of speech between our minds. Like to me, there's been times where I've had thoughts like, oh yeah, when you're like telepathically connecting with someone and you're just like directly sharing thoughts and ideas. And then I'm like, where did that thought come from? Like, we don't do that. What are you talking about? But the idea of telepathy or full concept communication or direct connection of minds and hearts seems like the most natural thing in the world to me. And speech as a secondary necessary means of communication seems like a very strange thing to me. So the separation between people seems very strange to me. And those moments of vulnerability are so deeply connective. It's like, yes, this is the way reality is. This is what's natural and real and normal. When in the world was how did I forget this? How did I get to thinking that the normal everyday world where there's so much division and separation was normal? Like, that seems very strange now.
Yeah.
So that's been my experience with these things. I would love to hear yours.
Yeah. I think that for me, it's kind of similar, because to me, I'd say if you define extroversion as very loud, always just out and about in that way, boisterous, whatever, then I don't really resonate with that. But if you define it as being recharged by with people, also don't define it as that. I personally do not recharge by being with people. However, I love, and I can't get enough of like intimacy. I'm always seeking intimacy. I'm always seeking interactions where I can talk to somebody else, or a small group of people, and we're just talking about like just things that allow us to get to know each other deeper and better. I think that actually that whole idea of like the telepathy, like that's beautiful to me, because especially for me, invitation is everything. So the invitation for someone to be able to invite me into their mind and to explore the crevices, like that to me is like what's exciting, what's really riveting for me. Because especially since I know they don't give that type of access to just everyone. And I want to further help them understand that hey, I will not abuse this. You can trust me. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, for me, like that's big. Like to me, I think it's like the same thing. Like this is what life should be. If it were up to me, it's like, dang, this is what it means to live. This is how I feel alive. Maybe an ESP out there, they feel most alive when they're riding that dirt bike through the rings of fire and stuff like that. But for me, I feel the most alive when I'm like sitting down with someone or a small group of people, and everyone's just like, and then they're just figuratively stripping, like we're just, hey, let's just share, and no judgment. Nobody's gonna like, look at his skinny body, or like,
Yeah.
or look at where'd you get those scars? Nothing like that. We can trust, like we're just really loving each other and appreciating each other for all that we are. So when people invite me in like that, then to me it's like, again, like that is just the greatest high like ever, because to me that's creating that intimacy. And in order to be able to be invited in that, I have to create an environment where people do not feel like I'm going to judge them. And I've had people tell me some really, really, really wild stuff. But the more that even then I continue to grow and understand, it's like, I get it. And I think it's just better for people to have that space to just share. Even if I disagree, I don't judge it. And it's just like, yo, thank you. This is a part of you. I appreciate you sharing this with me. And shoot, when I share things, even if you don't really resonate, thanks for at least listening, and thanks for not like looking at me differently in a negative light, but just seeing it as like, this is a part of me and accepting that of me. And once again, like that exchange is ecstasy. So that's how it is for me.
Excellent. You said.
Well, this has been magnanimous.
Indeed.
I really appreciated you joining me for this video, Emrys. And seriously, if you make a YouTube channel, I would genuinely love to see whatever you're gonna have on there. But also, if you don't, and it was just like, a joke, then that's also
I'll take it under consideration.
right. At least I have you on Telegram, and so when you think of stuff, then you send me, your podcasts of voice notes, and I just always love listening to them.
Yeah, the half-hour long voice notes that I sent you.
I like I said, I would not say it if it were not true. I love it. I absolutely love it, because it's pearls. It's not pearls that's being thrown to swine. Like, I genuinely, if I did not care, just like how I'd hope that somebody would not care, that's 30 minutes of your time. You're investing just as much as I'm listening. You know what I mean? And I have the privilege of putting it on 2x speed if I really wish. And so it's just like, so that's like even half of the time. You know what I mean? But honestly, it's like, no, like the fact that you're sharing this, it's like, I appreciate it. I respect it. And I want you to continue to do that. So, because then that helps me continue to also think about a lot of things. Like, you've really helped stretch and push my mind in so many ways, that, you've gotten me to go and explore things for myself. Like, and you just always have like different things to go into, different things that you introduce me to that I'm like, oh, interesting. Let me go look at this way. And then when I bring you certain things, like, oh, let me go look at that. And then you bring, and it's just this really nice flow and exchange, which to me, a lot of times, like, even like, just a side note, like, people often say things like, yeah, I wouldn't like to be with someone of like my favorite, my same type, whatever, because we can't help each other grow. Which personally, I don't really agree with that, because I think that you and I, we help each other grow like a lot, obviously in a platonic way still. So it's like, but I feel like if
You're not flirting with me.
right.
Oh darn, I have to reevaluate this entire conversation.
But yeah, like with, if there is like even like a romantic dynamic in that sense, it's like I can't help but see how those two would encourage each other to also grow as they're allowing themselves to have space to be able to go in their own ways and learn whatever, and then come back and share their insights and then create like a floor that continues to cave in itself. So yeah, all that to say though, like very happy to have had Mr. Mystic on my channel once again. Shout out to you, Nicole, for that nickname for Emrys. And man, I'm looking forward to the ENFJ male group video that we're going to be having soon.
Thank you so much for inviting me to this and for sharing all your perspectives on these things. Like, even having read your article and stuff, just every time you elaborate on how this all fits in, I am like delighted by the how do I put it? Like, you're up on the stage with all the colors of language dancing, and there's like so much complexity to you, and I really am continually delighted by it. And I also learn so much from you. Like you're describing the I think it's that if anything, the similarity contributes to the harmony, and that makes it easier for me to see your perspective, where oftentimes when I'm speaking with you, I don't feel as much barriers or boundaries between my way of seeing the world and your way of seeing the world. And not just because our ways are similar, but because rather than seeing them as two distinctly different things, it's like they're both dancing or flowing back and forth. And so rather than it being each person over here and we're just exchanging ideas, it's like we're both dancing with the ideas together.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And I love that. I love that. Dancing with the ideas. And it's always just so easy to share these things with you too. So again, I'm like really honored that we create that space for each other. I love you, man.
I love you too, man.
All right. Well, thanks y'all for watching. Leave your comments, questions, whatever it might be. And then also, I forgot to ask this earlier when we were talking about flirting, but Emrys, just in case, are you single?
Yes, I am. And this should be insane if that turns into something happening through the interwebs. Well, you're always dragging me into more adventures, Denzel.
Oh, I must. I'm just making your sexual 3 even easier.
Gosh, I don't think that's I don't know that that's the best strategy, but I welcome seeing where it goes.
All right, cool. If there are any young women out there who are interested in an ENFJ male with an erudite acumen, where can they find you?
Well, you'll probably be able to find me on YouTube very soon. I don't know how to respond to that. I don't know. Maybe should I
edit this part out?
It's up to you. Maybe I'll make a Twitch channel and just playfully flirt with people on the internet, and then invite you and all the other ENFJs to come join us.
Oh, so you're not interested in any woman reaching out if they're interested in you?
No, I'm fine if they do.
Yeah.
You can find me on Facebook for, oh God help me. But yeah, I mean, I'm always fine with people reaching out. I always love meeting new people, and I'm always open to the potential of romantic connection.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I wasn't actually.
No, yeah, you're good. I'm genuinely perfectly fine with all of that. I'm just very amused with the we're making a YouTube video. Anyone single out there?
Because I've already had several people ask me, I don't know where any ENFJ males are.
Oh,
it's
yes.
yeah, and so it's
Maybe
like
instead of a YouTube channel, I'll start a dating app for ENFJs.
now that they've gotten to know you for like 2 hours, then
Ah, yes.
yeah, now
All of
they're
you have just gone on a first date with me.
exactly.
And with Denzel.
Well, technically for you, this is our second date together, but
Yes, yes.
yes, but
Do
I'm
we,
okay
do we
sharing
multiply the dates? Is it like our fourth date because there's two of us here? Or
Yeah, that is true. There's a dualistic nature there.
I won't. Sorry, man. I don't look at things through a dualistic lens anymore.
Right. I meant non-dualistic nature. So
Oh yes, yes.
find Emrys McCright on Facebook. He's a very kind guy. And if you're interested, strike up conversation and let's see where it leads. But if he flirts with you, don't hop on it too quickly. Oh man.
Like, subscribe. Yeah. Done. Hey, I just wanted to briefly thank you for taking the time to watch this video, whether it was on regular speed or 2x speed, whatever it was. Just thank you for consuming the content. And around me, you should be able to see a few little buttons and logos for other recommended videos, because I make good content, new ones, but then I also have some really good old content too that you should probably check out. But make sure that if you really like this video, feel free to subscribe, to share. It really helps this humble channel to expand and reach more people and ultimately help more people. So once again, thanks for watching, and hope you have a great rest of your day.